I'm gonna go out there for lunch.
Matt, let's go ahead and keep that door open for a few more minutes here. I don't want people not to come back in. All right, everybody, we are going to get back to business here. I'm so glad that you're here. I think we had some people that decided to go to another class this hour, but I think
they could be down at the booth.
Well, I think there are some coming back because we've got a number of places around here where people left books and stuff. So hopefully they will. But I'm glad you're here. This hour, we're going to take the second visit into what I refer to as the Leadership Summit 2.0. Now, if you were not here the first hour, let me just sort of quickly explain. Professionally, I'm a leadership speaker. I speak all around the country to businesses, Fortune 500s and little tiny companies. Also, for about the last 20 years, that's not true, for about the last 18 years, I've been a full-time staff member at the Antioch Church of Christ in Nashville. They oversee my ministry. I do a lot of speaking at churches and events of this sort as well. The two things that I'm probably best known for are the No Debt, No Sweat Christian Money Management Seminar and this seminar, the Leadership Summit that we've done, oh goodness, I don't even, certainly in 700 or 800 churches around the country. So with that said, what we normally do when I come to a church is I share with them the Leadership Summit. And that's sort of the stepping off point. Well, I've done that here before. So today we're sharing some new material that I'm referring to as Leadership 2.0. In our first visit a while ago, we talked about the strategies of a leader. Right now, we're going to talk for a while about the practices of a leader. And this is kind of in part what the 2.0. This is not really the whole 2.0 visit for churches, but this is sort of a sample of it because we're limited on time. So with that said, let's just step back into this. I think, again, for those of you that may not have been with us, a while ago, I explained to everybody that I spent about 24 or 5 years running what grew to be a large advertising agency. We specialized in working with clients in whom we totally believed and doing our advertising in a totally clean, straight way. And God bless us, it was amazing. We won awards and never had a money-losing quarter in 20 plus years. So it was a real gift and blessing. But from that was born a lot of my thinking. And when I do leadership training, I frequently do it from the mind of an advertising or a branding guy. Come on in, folks. We're just barely getting started. I do it from the mind of a guy that's been in this advertising business and looks at things that way. So what we've been talking about in here is how to build brand you. And I've shared so far 5 of the 12 strategies that I want to share today. And again, I'm repeating this because we've got several people that were here first hour, and I want to give this some clarity. What I did in the first hour is I took the whole ball of wax: effective leadership, great goal setting, and also effective team building. And I put those all three of those concepts under the broad heading of branding, suggesting that what we need to be busy doing these days is branding ourselves, and more specifically building what I call brand you, in order to bring with us an understandable set of skills to any group that we're a part of, whether it's a team, whether it's the eldership at our church, whether it's in our own family, whether it's a Bible class or whatever it is. And I've been making the case for that. So again, I hope that's somewhat of an introduction. What I want to do now is go on with these last 7 touch points that we're going to look at today. And the phrase touch points, as I also explained a little earlier, is a phrase that I would have frequently used back in the days when I was running the ad agency. I would maybe walk down the hall and catch one of my employees and say, tell me, how many touch points is client ABC going to have this week? And my employee knew what I was asking. He understood, or she understood, that what I wanted to know was how many times would our advertising for this client touch their target market this week. And they might say, well, we've got 1 direct mail piece, and we've got 2 billboard hits, and we should have about 4 television commercials and a radio commercial. So what is that? That's about 8 touch points this week. And these are 12 touch points that I'm sharing today that really, I believe, build a great brand you. These are tough things. We're living in a world with very, very little discipline. We're living in a changing culture. I mentioned this so much in the first hour. Average person today is being told to live to your passions. We talked about that. Instead of that, what we need to understand is we need to build to our strengths and then make those our passions. One of the concepts that I wanted to share with you, our sixth touch point, is the thing that is referred to in advertising as the reach and frequency formula. Okay, what is a reach and frequency formula? This is, if you've ever been in or around advertising, you've heard this a million times. It has to do essentially with what I was talking about a moment ago. What percentage of our audience will we reach in this whatever given period of time, say within this month, and how many times will we reach them? Now, if you have a budget that is adequate to reach 100% of all the people in your market, but you can only do that one time per month, is it wiser to spend our money doing it that way? Or would it be more appropriate to determine to reach only 10% of those people, but reach each one of those people 10 times? What do you think? One time per month, 10 times per month? Somebody tell me.
10 times.
10 times per month. Because one message received is not a message that is even going to be heard. People do not hear a message the first time. And again, it has to do with getting through that pre-attentive barrier that we talked about in the last hour. That thing screens all this stuff out, and you have to have a certain amount of repetition. And again, I've heard a million different figures on this, 3 times, 7 times. I don't know what the magic number is, but I do know that it has to be done routinely. So the key to so much is understanding that if we're going to be effective leaders, we cannot lead everybody. We can't be all things to all people. Not everybody is going to like you. Not everybody's going to be in your rhythm. And believe you me, I have lots of people that are not in my rhythm. I like to wear gaudy shirts. I mean, Bonnie kids me about it all the time. I ride a Harley Davidson around Nashville. She says, boy, he doesn't look very tough, but man, I can see him 2 miles off. And you know, but I wear gaudy shirts a lot of the time. I'm a little more flamboyant, I know, than some people. And I can't explain that except to simply say that's just kind of the way I'm geared, and it's kind of my DNA. And sometimes that doesn't sit as perfectly with some people as others. But on the other side, I have a lot of people come up to me and say, I really like the way you're communicating this, because the other stuff I've heard has been boring. So the thing is, no matter what your style is, there are going to be some people that are going to reject it, and you're not going to fit everybody. You can't reach everybody that you would like to reach. And by the way, this is the frustrating thing for businesses, because they can't make as much money as they want to make. But I'm telling you, it ought to be even more frustrating for Christians, because we realize that we've got a world out here going to hell in a handbag. That is no exaggeration, and a culture that is in decline, and more than decline pretty much these days. I would say our culture is in decay. So the question is, why don't I want to reach everybody? Well, the truth is, it's because you can't. And you're wise to understand this early on so you don't try to. One of my favorite places to go is Waffle House. Does anybody in here like Waffle House?
Absolutely.
There's absolutely not a thing there that I'm supposed to be eating. But I love Waffle House. And we live in Nashville. Actually, we live in a suburb of Nashville, Brentwood. And there's a Waffle House not too far from us. And by the way, if you've ever seen a fancy Waffle House, this is it. I mean, it's all brick. It's really fancy. And you'll walk in there and Faith Hill and Tim, what's his name?
Tim McGraw.
Tim McGraw. They'll be kickback eating. You know, it's just a really cool place. And I like to go in there occasionally. But I'm thinking, what if maybe, say, about 2 weeks before Christmas this year, what if I walked into the Waffle House and I sit down and a little girl comes up to me to take my order. She's maybe 20 years old. She's really worn out looking, not very happy looking. Her name says, her badge says that her name is Megan. She's got one of those little round badges on over here with a picture of a couple of little toddlers. And she's not wearing a wedding ring. I mean, you kind of know the story. And she comes up, and she is not in a good mood, but I try to be kind to her. I speak with her a little bit. And she's maybe semi-receptive, but not particularly. And what would happen then if a couple of days later I come back again and just try to be kind to her and talk to her? And then maybe about, I don't know, a week before Christmas, I get with Bonnie and I say, hey, babe, why don't we go down and do dinner at the Waffle House tonight? So we go down, and Megan comes up to wait on us, and we're kind to her. We talk with her, and we visit. And then at the end of the dinner, when she drops off the check, and she walks away, Bonnie reaches in her purse, or I reach in my billfold, and we pull out 3 crisp $100 bills and just slip those under the plate. And then we quietly get up and we walk outside into the darkness and sit down in the car. And we wait and watch Megan pick up the plate. For Christians, I'm telling you, for me, that's Christmas. And so here's the question. After the front of the year, when we come back in, Megan might be a little bit more open. And this actually kind of brings us to this next concept. It's what I call the GBE. And I like to tell people what you need to do is always be focused on going for the GBE. Now again, this is another one of my proprietary terms. It's very technical. You do need to write this down. You're going to forget it. Very technical term. The GBE is the goosebump effect. Here's what I'm suggesting. If you're going to lead effectively, if you're going to communicate Christ the way you want to, then, I know where everybody, all those students, they had to go to that other thing that Billy McGuigan's teaching. That's what, okay, I kept wondering, okay, never mind, now my mind is back. Forgive me, I've been zoning out a little bit on that. But anyway, back to this thing now. If in every one of our relationships, we need to essentially leave goosebumps behind. Because if you don't touch people where they live, what you have to say isn't going to matter. And in our fellowship, we have always been good at communicating data. We've not always been that great at communicating the heart. And we need to be aware of this. We need to wake up to some of this. You see, when you tell the story and you touch a person's heart, that's when change, real change, can begin to happen. Mm-hmm. Now, let me explain to you what I'm talking about, and this is very important. It's because of the real war that's going on now in our culture between modernism and postmodernism, okay? Many of you are familiar with this, but in case you're not, those of us in this room that are much over 50, we grew up in the age of reason. It goes back about 400 years. And it was a time when people in the Western world were being told that if you get enough facts and stack them on top of each other, you come to a clear, inevitable conclusion. Doesn't matter how you act, feel, or think. Fact is fact is fact. Now that is what the restorationist movement was born in. That was the culture. That's what, that's it. Now that is the way modernists tend to think. On the other side, if you're much under 50, you were born in the age of what is now known as the age of postmodernism. And you were generally told, whether you bought into this or not, you were generally told, hey, your truth is your truth, my truth is my truth. If it feels good, do it. Don't get in my way on anything, and let's all be nice to each other. Now, in reality, I happen to agree with both sides, and I also happen to disagree with both sides. On this side, with the modernists, I agree that there is such a thing as absolute truth, absolutely. No ifs, ands, or buts. We talked about that a while ago when I talked with you more about the message versus the method. And I showed you that illustration from American Airlines. But I believe that. I just think that there is such a thing as absolute truth. You have a right to your opinion. You do not have a right to your own set of facts. Facts are facts, okay? But over here on this side, we have young people who are saying, okay, well, if you have the facts, then why in the world don't you act like it? Why don't you show a little compassion, a little kind-heartedness? Where's your sensitivity? And I really am sympathetic to that. And what we have to understand, for those of you in this room that are much over 50, listen carefully. The way you communicated as a younger person will not work in today's culture. It simply will not work. What we have to understand is that what I used to share with audiences all around the world, and a lot of other speakers have said the same thing, it's not new with me, is that the longest 15-inch trip in the world is what? From the head to the heart, right? Yeah, I used to get up and say that all the time. Let me tell you something, that's dead wrong. That is dead wrong. I've just begun to realize it. The longest 15-inch trip in the world is the one from your heart to your head. It's what I call the motivation information matrix. And here's the deal. If you touch a person's heart, then you're going to get their attention. They're going to be open to what you're about to say to them. And before anybody in here throws rocks at me on this, let's just kind of remember, how did Jesus do his teaching? Was he a head guy? Did he usually open with Old Testament scripture? Now, what did he do? He told what? Parables. He told the story, right? He touched people's hearts. Now, if that's all you do, you're just an emotion manipulator. But if you will do this correctly and touch a person's heart, tell the story. Some people say, well, Steve, I'm just not much of a storyteller. Well, tough. Learn how to tell stories. Not. I mean, if you can help somebody's soul come to know Jesus, isn't it worth it? Tell your story. We don't do a lot of this in our fellowship. We should. We ought to have people come up routinely and share their testimonies with our churches. Here's what Jesus is doing in my life. A while ago, when I told you that story about how God healed me from that 1 to 2 year sentence I was given in, when I had my 5 bypasses in 1992, and how He chose to heal me. I mean, did that not touch somebody in this room? And again, I wasn't bragging. I mean, I told you, I don't know why God healed me. I mean, I didn't deserve it, but He did, and that set me on this path of going from success, hope in the business world, hopefully to some significance in other people's lives. So this is key. We have got to begin touching people's hearts, telling the story, just like I told you that story about Megan. Why don't we do things more like that and getting the people in front of people that way? Here's the 7th concept that I think is so important. We need to learn how other people learn, okay? Because we have data to communicate all the time. Now, some of you probably are familiar with what I'm going to share with you, but this is important. If we're going to communicate, we've got to remember and learn, like I said, learn how other people remember and retain things. This is Edgar Dale's concept. It's been called different things, the cone of experience, the education cone, various other things. But let me share with you what has been found here. And I'm not totally sure that I agree with all of this stuff exactly, but I think that the broad points are dead on. If you want to communicate a point to somebody and you only want them to retain, say, 10% of the concept, give them a book, okay? But if you'd like for them to kind of get a little bit more than that, what you can do, you can double that to about 20% by having them listen to a speaker, assuming the speaker knows what he's doing and is able to communicate. And preachers, listen carefully. And elders, by the way, you know, the Bible says that you are to be apt to what? Apt to teach. Are you teaching in your churches? Do you fill in for the preachers? I mean, you need to be able to do that. And I've heard all this stuff, well, you know, it's okay if you're a personal worker. Okay, great. If you can't speak up front and you do great personal work, great. But are you doing something like that? That's something you're called to do. Now, you're not just called to get up and dump facts. You're called to get up and communicate. If you're going to be a speaker, and by the way, let me just tell you something. I had a terrible stuttering problem when I was young. And the idea of getting in front of an audience was just the worst thing I could imagine. So this is a learned skill for me. And to date, you know, I've spoken, somebody counted this up recently, it's well over 3,500 times in well over 25 countries. And it's, you know, it's what I like to do now. But it wasn't something that was what I would have ever expected to do. I was the kid in the school when somebody about your age, they'd come up and they'd touch me, and they'd say, that's Steve Diggs' contamination, don't give it back. You know, that was my growing up. And I was a kid that got beat up after school, and I was the kid, you know, that never got chosen for the ball teams, you know. So you know, I was kind of, you know, I was pretty much like this. So it's a learned skill. You can do this if you choose to. But if you want people to retain more, show them a picture or a graph. That gets it up to about 30%. If you really want to have an impact, have a speaker work with a good PowerPoint. And again, I'm not making any brags about my PowerPoints, but let me tell you something. I spend hundreds of hours developing PowerPoints, okay? Hundreds of hours. And it's wrong to have the audacity to come in front of a bunch of people and expect to take up their time. If you've got 100 people in your room and you're going to speak for a half an hour, that means they're giving you 50 hours of time out of their lives. That's never going to come back. Now, are you worthy of that? Are you preparing enough to do that correctly? Are you stuck to your notes? Or do you have some little miserable PowerPoint up there that people in the back row can't even read? I mean, this is important stuff. If you want to retain about 70%, after the speaker and the PowerPoint, have a discussion. That's always a wonderful thing to do. Why don't we have more sermons at the end of church followed by a sandwich supper or lunch, and then everybody comes back at 1 o'clock and talks about what was taught? I mean, is there anything the Bible says you have to come back at 6 every Sunday? And by the way, that practice of Sunday morning, Sunday night, that started when we were farmers, and a lot of the farmers couldn't get there on Sunday morning, so they came Sunday evenings, okay? Well, we made that sacrosanct in too many situations. And then finally, if you really want to hit it with all bells and whistles, become a mentor. Become the person who shares this with other folks. And that's exactly what Christ has called us to do, isn't it? Aren't we supposed to be sharing what we know? And let's remember something else. For about the first 1,700 years of Christianity, practically no one ever even saw a Bible. Among those who did see the Bible, very few could even read the thing. So how did this faith of ours hang together? How did that happen? It was because people were talking to other people, and people were living it out, and people were sharing what they had learned generationally. So here's the eighth concept. The eighth concept is to learn how to hide the wires. I bet I could cut most of you in half here and count a bunch of rings, and probably as many as I've got. I mean, we've all got some miles on the odometer here, right? A bunch of them. Now, some of you, 12-year-olds sitting back here, I know, but I mean, some of you younger folks, you may not identify with this, but remember, this is the way stereo systems used to look, right? And there were always like 97 million wires coming out of the back of the thing, and nobody really knew what all of them went to. You see, when you look at something like that, it's so complex, you don't really want to step into it, right? Great leaders understand this, and great leaders make it their job to hide the wires. In other words, if you're going to be a successful leader, you don't just blaze a path, but you turn around and you clear out that path behind you to kind of open it up. So all of us that are coming behind you can come, at warp speed. They don't have to go through all the grief you went through. My daughter Mary shared something with Bonnie the other day, and I thought this was precious. Mary is a high achiever, wonderful kid. She's 29, and Bonnie said something to her about how well she was doing and how far she was going, and she said, "Mama, don't you understand?" And by the way, Bonnie homeschooled our kids from the time they were hatched until they were dispatched. I mean, kindergarten right up to college. And anybody doesn't like homeschooling, fine. I'm not preaching it, but I'm telling you one thing. All this craziness about, well, they don't cross socialize like they should. They do. And all of our kids graduated college, members of all the clubs, and all of them earned honors. So it worked for us. But I can still remember so many of those days, and some of those were really knockdown, drag-out days between Bonnie and Mary in particular. Bonnie said something to Mary the other day, telling her what a good job she was doing. And she said, "Mama, don't you understand? Your shoulders were my floor." Wow. Do you get that? You see, that's the whole thing. If we're going to be great leaders, we have to understand that the goal is for the others to be able to stand on our shoulders. We have to clear out all the wires. We have to decomplicate things. Really successful companies understand this. Before I do that, let me just read this from the scriptures. I like this. "But among you, it will be different. Whoever wants to be a leader among you must be your servant." This is what I'm talking about behind the wires. You've got to be the person who is prepared to just do the hard stuff, to really make it easy for anybody else that's following you. It's a whole different mindset. I started to say this, but I'll share this here with you now. There are two entities out there that I was thinking about, one of which is incredibly successful because they've hidden the wires. The other one has not yet been successful because they have not yet hidden the wires. The successful entity is MasterCard. And again, those of you who've had me in to do the No Debt, No Sweat seminar, I am not a fan of credit cards, but I'm simply telling you that this business model has been incredibly successful. I don't agree with some of the things they've done, but they are an incredibly successful business. MasterCard and other credit card users use these cards about 1 million times every single day. Why is that? It's because they're easy. I mean, you run into Chipotle's or you go into McDonald's or Starbucks or wherever, and you get something, you zap that card, bing a bang, you're out the door and everything's cool, no complication, right? But the very nanosecond that you scan that card, boing, all literally around the world now, there is a myriad of calculations and complications that are running everywhere. Very, very complex. But you don't know it. You don't care. You're in, you're out the door sucking, right? On the other hand, there's another entity out here, Bitcoin. How many of you in here are familiar with Bitcoin? Okay. It is a distributed ledger built on cryptography is essentially what it is. And it is a money form on there. I'm not in here promoting it or demoting it. I'm just simply telling you, Bitcoin has come along. It is an incredibly cool concept. Trouble is, you cannot go into a restaurant or into a store and buy anything and pay them with Bitcoin because they have yet to hide the wires. Now, there are some very, very smart people who are working on doing that right now. but it hasn't happened yet. The key to everything is to hide the wires. Make it simple for the people that are following after you. So this leads us to that 9th touch point. And by the way, I am rapidly trying to get through this class. So if you'd like to, we can have a conversation at the end. So don't all of you sit there like you're in some state of rigor mortis when you're done, okay? I'll be thinking about some things because I'd love to open this up to some conversation, okay? But here's the 9th touch point. It's what I call the forgotten secret of success. Simply put, successful people are modest people. And again, this flies in the face of everything the world around us tells us, that we're out here to promote ourselves, that it's all about me. It is not about me. We talked so much about this last hour, I don't want to belabor it, but I'm telling you the truth. As long as I think it's about me, then I'm inwardly focused. And I cannot serve other people. And the trouble is, you know, we always think about the people that are all about themselves as being braggadocious people, and that is a form of it. But the most insidious form of all about me is when I'm always thinking about me. All my evil, all my past sins, all my failures. Oh, I can't do this. Oh, I'm not very good at this. I mean, there's a teacher at Antioch. I love him to death. But when I notice that he's going to teach a class, man, I zip out to another class because he spends the first 20 minutes telling us all why he isn't worthy to teach. And I'm thinking, you know, no, you're not. None of us are. Okay, get over it. Let's get on with this. You see, this is another form of self-aggrandizement from the backside of that same coin. And it's important to understand this. Listen, we've all committed sins. We've all failed. There just simply comes a time when you turn it over to God, you get past your past. You say, listen, God, you have given me some gifts. Forgive me for not having used them more beneficially. Now help me to get over myself and start doing that very thing. I love Peggy Noonan. Peggy Noonan was a speechwriter for Ronald Reagan. She writes a regular column for the Wall Street Journal. Wonderful woman. We're becoming a conceited, nitwit society, pushing and self-aggrandizing. No one is ashamed to brag now and to show off. They think that it heightens them. They think that it's good for business. It used to be that if you were big, you'd never tell people how big you were because that would be kind of classless and small. In fact, it would be proof of smallness. The big are modest. The Bible talks about this. A tranquil heart gives life to the flesh, but envy makes bones rot. Do nothing from rivalry or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. I love that. You see, it all has to do with the problem of fruit salad. I'm not talking about this kind of fruit salad. That's pretty good stuff. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is this kind of fruit salad. You know, military generals and high officers typically wear their ribbons, pretty typical. And some military officers get well known for showing off every ribbon they can dream up, in many cases wearing their medals to take up more space on their uniforms. These are called the fruit salad officers. They tease about it, they laugh about it. Let me tell you a real fast story about how this is played out in history. This is Ulysses Grant. He was the winning general in the Civil War. Ulysses S. Grant was known, even though he was a full bird general, he was known for wearing private's uniforms. And he would stick his stars on his shoulder, so if somebody needed to see who he was, they could. But he was a very, very modest man. And in more recent history, we've had things like that happen. Here's a story of two generals. One general liked wearing ribbons. The other general won World War II. First general, General Petraeus, you remember him? He kind of went down, blaze of nothing. All of his ego and a lot of other things got him in trouble. But during the Second World War, this man, General Eisenhower, who was known for not wearing very many ribbons ever, he almost never wore anything that he did, that the uniform didn't require, he didn't wear it. Yet he was the great man who became a great president, but more than any other, I don't know if I can say that, but among a few others, won the Second World War. You see, it's not about the medals, it's not about the badges, it's not about what we wear, it's really about what we are inside. Let me share something with you. for it, wait for it, watch the guy in the front. Thank you, folks, thank you. You see, it's 3 undeniable truths of self-esteem. Self-esteem is an earned luxury. It only comes with great achievement. We're living in a world now where younger people have been told, hey, special. I'm telling you, they're not special until they do some special things. Let's just get with it. Number 2, you're not special. I just said that you're not special until you have excelled by doing great things. And number 3, overstated is overrated. I am sick and tired of this Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook. Facebook's old, but this culture where everybody has something they do. Oh, I'm eating. I mean, it is an ingracious way of living. And again, I have a fairly active social media thing going. I post a lot of my own stuff, and there's other people that post some of it for me. It's kind of a business sort of thing in my case. But I'm not against doing it, but I'm just simply saying we're not as important as some of us think we are to ourselves. So, which is it? Should we have self-confidence? I mean, everybody everywhere tells us, build up your self-esteem. We hear that all the time, do we not? Yeah. But the studies have been done. And did you know that some of the people in America with the highest levels of self-esteem are at this moment living in our prisons? Mm-hmm. Self-esteem, self-confidence should not be my goal. My goal should be to have God confidence. And this is when I realized that within me, there's not really much to be confident about. I mean, you could buy and sell all the chemicals that make this body up for less than what I pay for these shoes. There's not really anything worthy of me except for what Jesus has put into me. So my confidence is in a God who can change all of eternity as he wishes. This is where my confidence needs to be. And suddenly things change when you think this way. No longer will you ever have the audacity to look down at someone else and feel superior. But here's the cool thing. No longer will I ever, Craig, feel inferior to someone else like I have to look up to them. Instead, what you do is we all become people at eye level. And it's a totally different way of viewing the world. Here's the 10th touch point. If we're going to do this, we need to do what I refer to as mentally ambidextrous. Everybody knows what ambidextrous is, right? Merriam-Webster says it's using both hands with equal ease or dexterity. There have been a lot of ambidextrous people in our culture, or not our culture, but in the world's culture throughout all of history. By the way, people that are ambidextrous tend to be smarter. They tend to have a higher IQ than a lot of people, than most other people do. And pardon me, you probably remember early in school there was some kid in the class that could write with their right hand or their left hand. Maybe that was you. We call that person ambidextrous, okay? Well, I want to talk to you about ambidextrous, but a little different type. I'm going to talk to you again about becoming mentally ambidextrous. The scientists, and this is not exactly what they say, they're more nuanced, but generally speaking, scientists tell us that our brains are divided into 2 lobes, a left and a right lobe. And they tell us that people tend to work out of one lobe or the other. People who work out of their left lobe, these are the scientists, these are the engineers, these are the bean counters, the accountants, people like this. These are the people that like things pretty much cut and dry. On the other side, we have the right brain folks. These are the artists. These are the people who make the best salespeople. These are the people who find the good in life. They're always optimistic, not always, but much of the time, they're optimistic. These tend to be our better preachers in many cases, by the way. That's kind of the way it falls out. And everybody in every room in this world is looking around at other folks that are both kinds of people. And we have to understand that if we're going to deal with these people and get along and do things the way we have to do, then we have to understand who these other people are and how to deal with them. And as a leader, I'll pop this up, let me just pop it back up. As a leader, you do not have the luxury of being yourself. I hear people all the time tell me, not all the time, but with some regularity, I'll be teaching a leaders group and they'll say, well, I'm just being myself. Well, get over it. You cannot be yourself if you want to be a leader. You don't have the luxury. I mean, you may be right or you may be left brain, but you don't have the luxury of dumping that on other people around you. In other words, as a leader, your job is to figure out which of these people are. I mean, you can talk to a person for about, 2 2 or 3 minutes, and you'll know whether they're left or right brain. I look at this beautiful lady right here. You're right brain. I can tell that. And some of the others, I'm not sure about you. I know Craig's a right brain guy. I mean, you just have to talk for a couple minutes, and you can figure out whether a person's left or right brain. Now, here's the thing. Once you know, play to that side. Don't do what you're comfortable with. Do what they are comfortable with. I learned this when I was running the agency. I would sit down at the conference table, and down this side there would be all the left brainers. I mean, these are the account people, these are the bookkeepers and the accounting people, and all they want to do is stay on budget. Over here, this is where the right brainers are, the writers, the photographers, the artists, and all they wanted to do was make a pretty ad. And I learned that if I could not bring those two sides together, there was going to be open warfare in my business. And this is what we have to be able to do if we're going to lead effectively. We've got to become personally mentally ambidextrous, where we can work both sides. It's not a hard skill to learn. It's just something that you have to determine to do. You first have to figure out what that person is, and then try to communicate on a level that he or she can appreciate. Is that being duplicitous, Steve? No, not at all. You know, Paul said, I became all things to all people that I may win some people. And there's nothing wrong with this, and there's everything right with it. Here is the 11th.
Can I ask you a question?
Touch. Yes, sir.
Do you find profit in personality study, where you learn the differences and how to communicate based on a personality?
Yes, I do. I mean, it seems like every time somebody goes through some kind of a retreat, they come back and, they're all different ones. Well, I'm a bear, and I'm a cougar, and, and if Briggs, what is it? Briggs, I can't even get it out. Myers-Briggs, I couldn't even get it out. I mean, that's probably one of the better ones. I don't know. I guess it helps some. But, we tend to complicate crowbars, I think. I mean, you just kind of figure people out and go with it. I'm just saying. Is that a fair answer to what you're asking? Not much of an answer.
Well, I mean, I have to some degree, if I can understand how your mind works, how your personality works, I communicate, like you're saying, on the level that you get it. But if I don't understand you, then I can be, like a direct person doesn't need to beat around the bush.
Right.
But I can't be direct with a person that really needs you to be able to talk.
You're so right about that. It boils down to another thing that's very similar to this. It's called mirroring. How many of you have heard of mirroring? Familiar with this? It's just simply when you're sitting across the table from somebody that you want to communicate with, you just kind of gradually sit the way that person is. You notice your hands are still up here together? Mine are too. And there's a reason for this. It's because we're most comfortable with things that are most like us. So why add up or put up an extra barrier that's needless? Why do I need to sit back like this and talk to you like this? Why don't I sit like this since you're already sitting there? People are more comfortable, and we're going to have a more open dialogue, usually, when we do little things like this. These are just little things. And I hesitate to call these tricks because it sounds bad when you call something a trick. But these are little skill sets that if you'll learn these in your counseling, and especially when you're at a meeting and things get a little bit tense, get all over this sort of stuff. Be as much like everybody else at that table as you can be. Physically, emotionally, every way you can. That way, if you have a truth or a concept you want to share that you know is different from the others, they're not going to be already, against you. They're going to tend to be a little bit more open to you. Okay, here's the 11th concept I wanted to share with you today. It's the fact that if we're going to do this stuff right, we have got to get courageous. There is a lot of limp-wristedness going on in leadership circles these days. Everybody's trying to be politically correct. Everybody's trying to just kind of not upset anything, upset any apple cart. I'm telling you, there come times when there will be people at your church that are going to want to do things, and you're going to either have to capitulate and keep on doing the same old thing the same way you were doing it 10, 20 years ago to keep those people from fussing. And in the process, in many cases, you're going to be putting up walls that will keep younger people that might be interested in coming to Christ out. You remember when the Bible talked about, or when Paul talks about stumbling blocks? He's not talking about being a stumbling block to somebody that's been a Christian forever and who might get really mad and go down the road and go to some other little dead church. He's talking to people who are brand new Christians, and how an older Christian insisting on having their way can cause that younger person to fall away from the faith. We need to be aggressively figuring out everything we can do to communicate with people where they're at. And it's just, to me, that's a little bit heartbreaking. So Again, I love the scripture on this particular passage. Joshua, that's okay. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. Why? For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Christians were called to be courageous people. We actually have read the last part of the Bible, right? And we all know it's going to work out, right? So why don't we act like it? Why don't we take that proper level of authority when we step into any situation? Because we actually are the ones who know what's going to happen. You listen to this idiocy on TV, which I hope you don't do, and it's like, I mean, really? I mean, a friend of mine was telling me about Bill Maher the other day. I never watched this guy. I don't think I can even get him. But he was on there with 3 or 4 other people who were claiming to be atheists. And this friend of mine was just telling me, he said, I never listened to this, but I started listening. And he said, they were so asinine in what they were saying. They didn't even have a clue what we believed, but they were talking like they thought they did, and then beating those things up as straw horses. Courage, it's the state or quality of mind or spirit that enables one to face fear and danger with self-possession, confidence, resolution. It is bravery. We're called to be brave people. I do resiliency training for the United States Army at the 101st Airborne. And one of the things that we talk about all the time is the need for personal courage, which is defined as, in my judgment, as bravery. Bottom line, our culture is desperately searching for courageous leaders who say what they mean, and then curiously, they do what they say. These are those rare people who do the right thing. Why? Because it is the right thing to do. And they put value in that. That's what it boils down to in my judgment. So, how do we deal with this? Well, we have to remember that if you choose to succeed, if you choose to be courageous, then you're going to have a lot of detractors out there. Comes with the territory. Okay? This is a demonic thing that happens when you start to do the right thing, when you stand up for what's right, when you have enough gumption to lovingly tell somebody, brother, I know that's the way you want to do it, but it isn't effective anymore. You're going to always have detractors, people that get mad. Here's the thing we have to remember. Crabs hate succeeders. You know, when they drop these crab traps down to the bottom of the ocean, there's a piece of bait inside the thing, and all those crabs look over at it and they see it and they start walking sideways to get into that thing. And they all started crawling inside. They crawl inside. And finally, sooner or later, one of those crabs that has an IQ that does not start with a decimal point wakes up. And he says, you know, this is going to end badly. So he looks around, figures the way out, and starts to crawl out. Now, one would think that all those other crabs would say, whoa, I'm going to follow Joe right out of here. But you know what they do instead? They begin to claw the other one back down. That's what they do. This is the nature of crabs. Succeeders are those rare people who change without external motivation. Here's what you got to remember. Your success is a disruptive factor for those other people's excuses to fail. If you determine to do the right thing, to be courageous, then they are not going to like you. And remember this, the more you're not like other people, the more those people are not going to like you. Nobody ever takes a gun and shoots at people that are behind them, right? They always shoot at the people that they perceive are in front of them. Because you muck up everything they're about. I do work with McDonald's Corporation, and I was doing some work for a bunch of their employees at one point. And after it was over, I was talking to management, and they said, we're going to have to do some things differently in the future. I said, what happened? They said, well, all the stuff you taught was fabulous, but these kids of ours, the workers, they live in very low socioeconomic areas of the city and so forth. And they said, as soon as you teach them these things and they started doing them, then all of their friends and even their families started yanking them down, making fun of them. You see, this happens. And it's going to happen especially when the devil has got a dog in the fight. He wants you to fail. And he's going to do everything he can to beat you up. Here are finally is the last touch point. And these are three peace givers that I want to leave you for the road. Three things that if you will remember going forward will be much more enjoyable. Number one, you need to remember that past dumb does not have to equal future dumb. Whatever you've done in the past is over. Repent of it. Ask for forgiveness. You don't have to do it again. Here's the second one. It is never too, listen carefully, it is never too late to begin doing the right thing. And number three, when you put it all down, you've only got one job in this world. This makes life very simple. Listen to me carefully. You've only got one job in this world. And that job is to make the next right decision. That's it. That's all you have to do. Well, it's been fun being with you. I would encourage you, if you will, to pull your telephones out, even right now if you want to. And you can go to my website, stevediggs.com. There'll be a little thing pop up, and if you will, just put in your name, or I don't know if you have to put in your name, put in your email, and you'll be added to my email list. About every 10 days, we send out a little, it's totally free, a little newsletter that has a great leadership concept on it. And also there will be a 2 or 3 minute long video where I'll be teaching some new point, some new strategy. And I'd just love for you to join and receive that if you want to. What about questions, comments, rebuttals, anything? Yes, ma'am.
What's the number 2 on your class?
The number 2?
Number 2.
On your last slide, under.
It's never too late to start doing the right thing. Yes, sir.
I was tasked with making posters for a display of what the church has been doing the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And it dawned on me this last time that I was doing what you said not to do. And that was putting all this stuff on the big billboard that was going on, that people were walking by it and not seeing it. And I decided and told people I was doing it for, said I'm doing it all wrong. I need to trim this thing down, it's too busy, that kind of thing. So I appreciate your verifying my conclusion.
Thank you. He's referring back to a point we talked about in the first hour when I talked about the need to become a BO kind of person. In other words, not what you're thinking, living a benefit-oriented lifestyle. And I shared some advertising experience, a terrible billboard that was not benefit-oriented versus one of Coke Zero's that was incredible. Thank you, brother. Somebody else? Yes, sir.
I don't know, it's interesting. You talk about 2 different types of people. Well, I'm a nut about reading, how to teach kids to read. And there was a great program called Open Court, and it was bought out by another company, and they wanted to market it because it was a failing program. And the guy who was the original author actually emailed me and told me that it had been, how do you say it? Is it a face group? What do you call it when you get together and the people talk about how to market something?
Focus group?
Yeah, focus group. He said it was focus group to death. All I'm gonna say is when the new one came out and it became extremely popular, used in many schools. That was a very poor program. Anyway.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
I don't know.
Anybody else? Any other? What other thoughts has this spurred? Does anybody see anything that will be of benefit to you when you get back home, like tomorrow?
Oh, yeah, man.
Yeah.
These 2 books pretty much summarize what you gave.
No. There may be 2 or 3 of these points in those books. There's other stuff. I teach so much of this, and really, I probably share something in the range of about 75 different concepts, and I've shared 12 of those here today. So there's a lot of other stuff. But so you'll see some duplication in the book, and you'll see other things that I didn't talk about.
Are you making these
All
slides?
working on the same.
Yeah, it's on the same general direction. Yes, sir.
Great, thank you.
Are you making these slides available?
No, I don't usually do that, but I'm happy for anybody to shoot pictures of them or anything that you want. I'm glad to do that. Yes, sir. Somebody have their hand up over here?
You just answered it, thank you.
Okay. And listen, we have a few of these books left, and I would also remind you that if you're interested in talking with me about doing No Debt, No Sweat seminar, or to do a leadership summit, just come up here. I've got some time before I go to the airport. But if you want one of these books right here, these are both $16.95. I've got a few of these left. You can have one of these for $5 as long as I've got them today. It's cheaper than you can get them on the internet. And this book right here, you can get for $10 if you'd like to have it. This is a book on sales and communications. This is leadership. Thank you all.
Thanks.